Before radio, television, or the internet, Americans learned about the world through ink pressed onto paper. A newspaper might arrive days or even weeks after an event had taken place. Its pages could contain reports of battles overseas, ships entering port, land for sale, political arguments, crime, disease, business advertisements, and local gossip. In early America, newspapers did more than record history. They helped create it. They challenged governors, spread revolutionary ideas, shaped political parties, promoted reform, defended slavery, attacked slavery, and helped connect people across a rapidly growing nation. The story of the American newspaper begins in the colonies, when printing was difficult, expensive, and closely controlled. The first printing press in British North America arrived in Massachusetts in 1638. Early printers mostly produced religious books, laws, sermons, pamphlets, almanacs, and government notices. Printing was slow and physical work. Every letter had to be selected as an individual piece of metal type and arranged by hand. Ink was applied, paper was pressed against the type, and each page was printed one sheet at a time. Paper itself was valuable and often made from linen and cotton rags. A shortage of old cloth could become a shortage of paper. Printers also faced political danger. Colonial governments did not believe that anyone with a press automatically had the right to publish whatever they wanted. That became clear in 1690 when Benjamin Harris published what is generally considered the first newspaper in the English colonies. It was called Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic. Harris hoped to publish monthly, but colonial authorities had not approved the paper. Officials shut it down almost immediately, making its first issue also its last. The incident raised a question that would follow American journalism for centuries. Who controlled the news? 14 years later, in 1704, John Campbell published the Boston News Letter, the first regularly issued newspaper in British America. Campbell was Boston's postmaster, which gave him access to letters, official reports, foreign newspapers, and information arriving by ship. This connection between newspapers and the postal system became extremely important. Postmasters were often among the first people in a town to receive news from distant places. Early newspapers did not usually employ large reporting staffs. Editors copied stories from letters and other newspapers. A report might begin in London, be printed in Boston, copied in New York, and then appear again in Philadelphia. This allowed information to spread widely, but it also allowed mistakes and rumors to spread. The colonial printer was usually more than a journalist. A print shop might produce books, legal documents, advertisements, government forms, pamphlets, and almanacs. Newspapers depended heavily on advertisements. They announced land sales, imported goods, missing animals, ships arriving in port, medical remedies, and public auctions. They also advertised enslaved people for sale and printed notices offering rewards for escaped enslaved men, women, and children. This is one of the great contradictions of the early American press. Newspapers could speak of freedom in one column while supporting human bondage in another. One of the most successful colonial printers was Benjamin Franklin. Franklin became the publisher of the Pennsylvania Gazette, which contained news, essays, advertisements, political commentary, humor, and unusual stories. He understood that a newspaper had to be informative, but it also had to hold the reader's attention. In 1754, Franklin published the famous Join or Die image, showing a snake divided into sections representing the colonies. It warned that the colonies would remain weak unless they united. Newspapers were beginning to become powerful political weapons. Another important moment came with the trial of printer John Peter Zenger in New York. Zenger's newspaper published attacks on Royal Governor William Cosby, accusing him of abusing his power. Zenger was arrested for seditious libel. At the time, even a truthful statement could be treated as libel if it damaged the government. At his trial in 1735, Zenger's lawyer argued that the accusations should not be considered criminal if they were true. The jury found Zenger not guilty. The verdict did not immediately create legal freedom of the press, but it became an important symbol. It encouraged the idea that printers should be able to criticize government officials without automatically being punished. That belief became even more important in the years leading to the American Revolution. During the 1760s and 1770s, newspapers helped turn local complaints against British rule into a shared colonial movement. They printed arguments against the Stamp Act, reports of protests, political essays, speeches, and letters from other colonies. A reader in Virginia could learn what people in Boston were doing. A merchant in Philadelphia could read arguments first printed in New York. The colonies were separated by great distances, but newspapers helped create a common political conversation. After the Boston Massacre in 1770, patriot newspapers described the event as proof of British brutality. Loyalist writers offered a different version. The fight for independence was also a fight over which story people would believe. When the Revolutionary War began, newspapers carried reports of battles, troop movements, shortages, victories, defeats, and rumors. Accuracy was often uncertain. Casualty numbers changed, defeats were minimized, and victories were exaggerated. Printers were not neutral observers. Many openly chose sides. Some patriot printers moved their presses to avoid British forces. Loyalist printers were threatened, driven away, or forced to close. When the Declaration of Independence was approved in July 1776, printer John Dunlap produced broadside copies during the night. Those copies were distributed across the colonies, read aloud in public, and reprinted in newspapers. Print gave the Revolution a voice. Women also played important roles in early American printing. Women such as Anne Franklin, Elizabeth Timothy, Anne Catherine Green, and Mary Catherine Goddard managed print shops and published newspapers, often after the death of a husband. In 1777, Mary Catherine Goddard printed an official copy of the Declaration of Independence that included the names of the signers. Those names made the act of rebellion personal. The signers were publicly identifying themselves as traitors in the eyes of the British government. After independence, Americans had to decide how much freedom newspapers should have in the new nation. The First Amendment, adopted in 1791, prohibited Congress from abridging freedom of speech or of the press. But that protection was quickly tested. Newspapers in the early republic were fiercely partisan. Federalist papers supported a strong national government, while Republican papers associated with Thomas Jefferson attacked centralized power. Editors accused political opponents of corruption, madness, treason, and even secret plans to create a monarchy. In 1798, the Federalist government passed the Sedition Act, which made certain writings against the government illegal. Several newspaper editors were prosecuted or imprisoned. The law became deeply unpopular and strengthened the belief that the press must be free to criticize government leaders, even when that criticism was harsh or unfair. During the early 1800s, newspapers expanded rapidly. New towns wanted their own papers, which reported elections, court cases, marriages, deaths, crimes, business openings, and local events. The postal system helped papers travel cheaply across long distances. Railroads and steam-powered presses later made distribution faster. New groups also began creating newspapers to speak for themselves. In 1827, Samuel Cornish and John Russwurm founded Freedom's Journal, the first African-American newspaper in the United States. It opposed slavery, defended black communities, promoted education, and challenged racist coverage in white newspapers. In 1828, the Cherokee Nation began publishing the Cherokee Phoenix in both English and Cherokee. The paper printed tribal laws, news, political arguments, and defenses of Cherokee sovereignty. These publications showed that newspapers could preserve language, organize communities, and resist oppression. A major transformation came in the 1830s with the rise of the penny press. Before then, newspapers were often expensive and aimed mainly at merchants, professionals, and political leaders. In 1833, Benjamin Day launched The Sun in New York City and sold it for 1 cent. Instead of focusing mainly on political speeches and foreign affairs, the paper featured crime, police reports, scandals, accidents, sports, and human interest stories. Newsboys sold individual copies on the street, allowing ordinary workers to buy newspapers without paying for a long subscription. The penny press greatly expanded the newspaper audience, but it also increased sensationalism. Editors discovered that shocking crimes, strange events, and outrageous stories sold papers. In 1835, The Sun published The Great Moon Hoax, a series claiming that bizarre animals and winged human-like creatures had been discovered on the moon. Thousands of readers were fascinated. The episode proved that sensational and misleading stories existed long before television or social media. Newspapers also became powerful tools for reform. William Lloyd Garrison's abolitionist paper, The Liberator, demanded an immediate end to slavery. Other papers supported temperance, labor rights, religious causes, women's rights, and political reform. Pro-slavery newspapers fought back, defending slavery and attacking abolitionists. By the 1840s, the telegraph changed journalism again. News could now travel between cities in minutes instead of days. Because telegraph messages were expensive, newspapers cooperated to share reports, helping create the Associated Press. The telegraph encouraged shorter writing and the practice of placing the most important facts at the beginning of a story. During the Civil War, newspapers became essential. Families searched them for battle reports, casualty lists, military announcements, and letters from soldiers. Reporters followed armies while editors rushed to publish special editions. But reports were often confused or contradictory. Governments and generals censored information, fearing newspapers might reveal troop locations or military plans. By the late 1800s, newspaper production had become a major industry. Faster presses, railroads, telegraph networks, advertising, and new typesetting machines allowed publishers to produce enormous numbers of papers. The linotype machine, introduced in the 1880s, allowed operators to create entire lines of metal type using a keyboard. This made typesetting much faster. Large city newspapers now employed reporters, editors, artists, press operators, and thousands of carriers and newsboys. Competition became intense. Joseph Pulitzer's New York World and William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal used bold headlines, illustrations, crime stories, scandals, and emotional reporting to attract huge audiences. This style became known as yellow journalism. By 1900, the American newspaper had changed completely. The earliest colonial papers had been small, expensive, and read by a limited audience. Now newspapers were mass-produced, widely distributed, and capable of influencing millions. They had helped spread revolution, create political parties, promote reform, defend injustice, expose corruption, spread rumors, and connect a growing nation. It exposed wrongdoing, but it also published hoaxes. Yet newspapers created a public space where arguments could travel, ideas could spread, and leaders could be challenged. The early American newspaper did more than describe the nation. Page by page, it helped build it. Thanks for watching Morning Paper Memories. Please like and subscribe for more forgotten headlines through history.